Before the turning point in the Call of Duty franchise where Call of Duty first made the jump to the modern era and became one of these staples in competitive first-person shooters, Call of Duty had become known for pushing the envelope with creating realistic World War II experiences that were both tactical and immersive. But after the release of Call of Duty 3, the franchise was starting to become a little bit more stagnant. While the games were still being well received, some fans were pointing out that the game was starting to become a little bit repetitive, as each Call of Duty game was more or less a very similar experience with very similar maps and gameplay. Activision noticed this and decided to pivot and start development on several different projects that hopefully would reignite interest in the Call of Duty franchise. And one of the games that we never got to see was Call of Duty Devil's Brigade. Today on Rocket Sloth, we're taking a look back at this project and what could have been of this Call of Duty game. 2007 was a really important year for Activision and the Call of Duty franchise as a whole. They were releasing Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare, which would pivot the entire franchise away from World War II and try to renew interest in the game by doing something completely different. And while we know Call of Duty 4 ended up becoming immensely successful, Activision was still unsure if it would be well received, and it was a calculated risk on their part. Because of this, Call of Duty 5, which would have returned to World War II, was already in early development and would later be renamed to World at War and released a year later. But Activision got together and put together a new team of game developers called Underground Development and gave them the objective of creating a brand new Call of Duty experience that would both change the Call of Duty gameplay and reignite interest in the franchise, especially if Call of Duty 4 and Call of Duty 5 wouldn't be successful, while also sticking to the Call of Duty brand and try to mix it up in a way that would get more people playing the game, especially if they tried something different that could be marketed in a new way. And with that, for 9 months, Underground Development began work on what was going to be called Call of Duty Devil's Brigade. And actually, they made quite a bit of progress with this game, to the point where there were actually several running demos of this game that were both playable and re-uploaded onto YouTube. This Call of Duty game was set to be more of a tactical strategy game that focused on third-person gameplay rather than the typical first-person shooter gameplay that Call of Duty is known for, but would have also had options possibly to go into the first-person mode as well. The game would be set during late World War II, focusing on Italy, and players would play as a squadron leader, using the D-pad to direct orders in the squad and give commands to other players. Kind of similar to some of the things we saw in Call of Duty World War II a decade later. Players would be able to direct NPCs to attack, do a barrage, hold the line, or form up. You'd also be able to direct individual players into performing certain tasks like recon or do a stealth kill on an enemy soldier. While this game was only in development for 9 months, there still wasn't a ton of content put into this game, and the game was still mostly unpolished, but it did have a playable demo, and a ton of screenshots actually were leaked from this level or levels that we did get to see. It shows a lot of the set pieces of a war-torn Italy, which is actually pretty unique, especially because we haven't seen a World War II game go to Italy in a very long time. And from the video and screenshots that we do see, it looks like some sections were developed and rendered a little bit more than other sections. The backgrounds and outside skyboxes of the maps look low textured, but some of the close quarter stuff actually looks pretty good, especially for 2007 standard. It looks like they were using the same engine or a very similar engine to the one used in Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare, but they could have been reusing some of the assets that the World at War team Treyarch was working on at that time to make it look a little bit more dated and World War II era. As far as weapons in the game, it looks like for this working beta, the Thompson was the main gun that was used to represent what the game would look like, and the MP40 was also used as an enemy class weapon. However, the AK-47 also was in a couple of the screenshots and parts of the demo, meaning that they were probably using the Call of Duty 4 engine as a base starting point to make the game, and it was already loaded in just to test some things out. Unless this game was intended to span then sometime after World War II as well, after the AK-47 was invented. There were also icons in place that this game could have had flashbangs, grenades, and night vision goggles, but once again, since Call of Duty 4 had all those features and this likely was developed on top of that engine, it's possible that they were just using the icons and it wasn't necessarily going to be in a final product if they ever got that far. But we do see some vehicles from the World War II era, like a truck, a tank, and we also get this nice SD KFZ 251, which I don't know what that classifies as. It's an anti-tank weapon. As far as the way that the story would have gone in this game, we still don't know a whole lot of detail. The general manager, Scott Bandy, was working at Activision at the time when he was assigned this project, and he pitched the idea of the Devil's Brigade, which was a band of American and Canadian soldiers who fought through Italy and France all the way up until the end of the war. The brigade would have a group of some of America's most troublesome troops and Canada's most decorated. It was a pretty unique concept, and it would have actually been something different than we've seen in the regular Call of Duty games, and it would kind of show Canada's role, since a lot of the time Canada's role in World War II is often overlooked. The mission that was in development would have involved the soldiers trying to protect different bridges and make sure that they were able to stop Germany from breaking off the bridges and protecting Italy and Rome. But there were a ton of other ideas on how this game would later be incorporated into a more cinematic type of story, less so than just specific time periods in World War II or specific missions. But at least we know that each mission would have had a role to play. And for the most part, it looked like game development was going really well with this game. The team was still relatively small, but it looked like for the most part, people were pretty passionate about this game and making something completely unique that would have told a interesting story. However, after the release of Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare, Activision made heaps of money because of that game, and it was one of the best Call of Duty games that we've had to date and completely changed the gaming industry as a whole. It actually allowed Activision to surpass EA as the #1 video game publisher in the world, which was the first time that's ever happened in 15 years. And it made Activision extremely attractive for both investors and other companies wanting to have some sort of role in Activision. In March of 2008, Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare had already been out for a couple of months, and Call of Duty 5, renamed to World at War, was in its late development of the game. With that, another development studio called Vivendi Games merged with Infinity Ward, which was a huge plus for Activision. And from a financial perspective, it made sense that they should hurry up and work on development of a follow-up game to Modern Warfare. And with all the new investors coming in and studio merges coming together to prepare for development on this next Call of Duty game, Activision pretty much was forced to have to clean up the books and make things really organized. There wasn't really a reasonable explanation as to why they should fund this Call of Duty game, because they had something that really was working well, and they had Treyarch working on the next Call of Duty game, and they could use the information that they learned from Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare to plan out future titles. And in that interview with Polygon, it looks like the game just kind of got pushed to the side because it was just at that turning point where they would need to fund a ton of money into getting the game really into the later stages of development, and just that wasn't the focus of Activision at the time. And while Underground Development put a lot of work into this game and getting it off of the ground and getting it started, just sometimes this stuff happens in the industry and things fall through. However, the day that the game did officially get canceled, Scott Bandy, the general manager, did a meeting with the team of Call of Duty Devil's Brigade and told them outright everything that was happening and offered them an option to get a severance package now if they wanted to, and they hadn't already signed a severance package when they initially started. And he said for those who weren't looking for a severance package, he would try to hold on to them for as long as he possibly could until money ran out. And from the looks of it, a lot of the people who worked on this team were later hired onto other teams like Treyarch or found jobs in the industry elsewhere. This kind of speaks some commentary onto what's going on now in the gaming industry, as it looks like there's less emphasis and support for people working in the gaming industry as there was maybe 10 years ago. Just recently, Activision laid off 800 employees, and while most of them weren't in the game development field and were more marketing, PR, and esports people, the fact that they didn't know they were losing their jobs and didn't really have any options until the day of, and that social media broke the news first, is a pretty awful way to treat your employees. And it's just kind of interesting here to see that at least these people who worked on this forgotten piece piece of media did get some sort of heads up and options for their future. Interestingly enough, maybe some elements of this game were later incorporated into other Call of Duty games down the road. In Modern Warfare 2, the game that most likely took the place of where Devil's Brigade would have released, there was a third-person team deathmatch mode implemented into the multiplayer, and it's likely that some of those ideas that were originally put into Devil's Brigade were translated into it. Sure, third-person team deathmatch wasn't very popular of a game type, but it was cool that they at least had put something that was likely made by this small team into the next game. And the whole idea of a third-person strategy Call of Duty game would be picked up again by another studio who was going to work on another canceled Call of Duty game known as Call of Duty Vietnam. We did a whole video on that already, and if you haven't heard of the Call of Duty game that was supposed to come out in 2012 instead of Black Ops 2, you should really check it out because it's a really unique idea that they were working on, and the development history on that is kind of interesting. But anyways, that's all for today. If you like these types of videos where we look back at kind of the glory years of Xbox and, you know, the Call of Duty games and stuff like that, be sure to subscribe to Rocket Sloth and hit the like button. Would you have played this game, or do you think the idea was just a little bit too different? Let us know in the comment section down below, and we'll see you all next time with a brand new video.